right, good evening. My name is Jennifer Willis, and tonight I want to do three things. First, I want to introduce you to cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Next, I want to talk about a specific tool in CBT called the cognitive reframe. And third, I want to talk about some ways to apply CBT and the cognitive reframe to your daily habits in order to increase awareness and intentionality. So why CBT? After high school, I chose to spend 10 more years in school studying psychology, counseling, and counselor education, looking at topics like decision-making, identity, and relationships. And I learned a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy during this time. It's come to frame the way that I understand how we move through the world and how we make sense of our lives. CBT is a lens. It's a framework that's used in psychology to explore the relationships among a person's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It's the most commonly used approach in counseling, especially for anxiety and for depression. The basic idea in CBT is that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are interconnected. And while they interact in more than just one single direction, a good starting place is to recognize that our thoughts impact our feelings, which drive our behaviors. So most of us begin the day with an alarm clock, a shared experience. How many have had those mornings where you wake up and that first thought is one of dread? I do not want to get up. I am so tired. Oh my God, it's only Tuesday. Okay? Those feelings that you experience are most certainly sadness, frustration, maybe helplessness. And then what? What's the behavior? We stay in bed. We reset the alarm. Maybe we get out of bed, but probably pretty slowly. Cognitive behavioral therapy gives us a lens to view this example with particular attention to how our thoughts impact our feelings, which drive our behaviors. Now, you may be a step ahead of me in thinking about how our behaviors reinforce those thoughts and feelings that prompted them in the first place. Getting a late start to your day, maybe arriving late to a class, missing a meeting, only serves to reinforce that sense of frustration and fatigue that prompted it in the first place. If we look back to that first thought, we see the ripple effect that it created for the rest of the day. So you get the idea. CBT explores how our thoughts impact our feelings, which drive our behaviors, and how those behaviors reinforce the thoughts and the feelings in turn. One of the helpful things about CBT is it allows us to see how small habits can have a big impact on our lives. So I can't see you well, but how many of you know Miss Sangari? I'm hoping many of you, okay? I know that Miss Sangari is an excellent math teacher. I know she's a really warm and kind person. What I learned about her earlier this year, she is also a master of CBT techniques. There was an afternoon this fall, and I actually think it was a Tuesday because that day had felt especially long. I was kind of trudging down from the main building to the Watkins Fieldhouse. I hope you know this route. I was kind of feeling sorry for myself and actually passed Miss Sangari on the way, and I said something to her about not knowing if that hill, if it's worse to climb in the morning or worse to climb in the afternoon. She flashed me this big smile and she said, "This is my wellness hill." Her wellness hill. We were walking, she said, this hill keeps me healthy. We were walking the same hill, and in fact, she was actually walking up it. And we had completely different thoughts about the experience. I'm guessing that most of you have climbed this hill 100 times or more this year. And I'm wondering how that hill impacts your day. But more importantly, I'm wondering how you frame that climb. Sometimes our frames are positive, like Miss Sangari's was that day. This hill, it keeps me healthy. Sometimes our thoughts are negative, like mine were. I don't want to climb this hill right now. Sometimes our thoughts are irrational, meaning that they're out of sync with the way the world really is. And here we move from a simple negative thought or frame, like not wanting to climb the hill, to something more. This hill is impossible. I am too tired to climb the hill. I'll never make it up. It's easy for irrational thinking to become pattern thinking. That is, thoughts that we experience regularly. I can't overcome challenging experiences. I'm too tired to face obstacles. I should avoid whatever. What CBT tells us is that this pattern thinking is likely to result in pattern behavior, or pattern feelings and pattern behavior. So the more that we fear and move away from challenging experiences, the more likely we are to fear and move away from challenging experiences in the future. The other issue with irrational thinking is that it adds to our emotional stress. Buying into self-defeating thoughts, feelings, and actions makes us feel helpless, even when we're not. We begin to believe things like, I can't, I'm not good enough, I should avoid. Okay? I'm guessing that not many of you have considered how that hill impacts your day, or really any emotional stress that it may add. What I'm counting on is that there are a number of other hills in your life that also add to your emotional stress, and you may not be thinking about it. What CBT tells us is that it is not the hill that impacts our feelings and our actions, but rather how we think about the hill. The good news is that CBT wants us to have tools, and cognitive reframe, it's one of those tools. It's a way to identify and restructure negative and false beliefs so that we can think, feel, and act differently, taking a more positive perspective, relieving some of that emotional stress. We can use the cognitive reframe with both false thoughts and irrational thoughts, but irrational thoughts, it's a little bit more difficult because you have to make the shift, because irrational thoughts, while they aren't true, they often feel really true. Once you can recognize that it's an irrational thought, though, you take away some of that power, and you can begin to replace it with something more beneficial. Let's come back to the hill. Irrational thinking may say, the hill between the main building and the JRCAC is something to be avoided. It's too steep. I'm too tired. I won't make it. Let's reframe that. Oops. Let's reframe that, okay? This hill gets me where I need to go. It's steep, but my legs are strong, and climbing the hill makes them stronger. Sometimes I think that we hesitate to think optimistically because it can feel fake. Do I really believe it's a wellness hill? But let's flip that for a second, because the negative stuff, it isn't any more true. It's also not grounded in reality. The hill is not too steep to climb. It's hard to think of a scenario where you are so physically exhausted that you cannot make it up the hill. Positive or negative, we choose the frame that we use. I also want to point out that this skill, this cognitive reframe, it's a skill you have. I'm confident that you can think of a time that you've used it with a friend. They are experiencing negative thoughts around a breakup, a bad test score, a tough loss. And you help them brainstorm and replace those negative thoughts with something more positive. So if it's a skill we already have, why don't we use it more often with ourselves? I think we should. Let's talk about some ways to do it. First, I encourage you to check your security. Do you let negative thoughts enter your mind without even realizing it? Pay attention to your thoughts. Catch the ones that are negative. Replace those negative thoughts that create negative patterns in your life. Next, check your language. CBT tells us how powerful words can be. Is it the worst? Do you hate it? Is that person out to get you? Or did they just make a mistake? Next, shine a spotlight on your own power. Our minds are very quick to portray us as less powerful than we really are. But cognitive reframe, it allows us to better identify our own ability to cope. I am strong enough to climb the hill. Climbing that hill, it makes me stronger. Recognize that positive thinking and negative thinking are both options, and we have more power in that choice than we often give ourselves credit for. Positive thinking is a skill. It is a habit. So we must choose it, and we must practice it as much as we possibly can. Maybe you walk outside in some rain and you think, this weather is awful. Notice that thought, catch it. And then as quickly as you can, find 5 positive things. The grass is green, those flowers are blooming, the air smells fresh. That kid loves jumping in those puddles. I have some new rain boots I can wear. You can set your phone for an alarm twice a day to cue yourself to notice negative thoughts and replace them with more beneficial options. Dirty laundry, an annoying chore, or a sign of how many awesome clothes you have. A busy schedule, overwhelming, or a sign of the number of ways that you contribute to your community. Listen for these opportunities in your own thinking. Recognize that positive thinking and negative thinking, you have that choice. Try to talk to yourself more like you would talk to a friend. Remember that your inner voice, it is the only voice that you will live with your entire life. Start working now to retrain it, to identify that trap of negative thinking and replace those with more positive thoughts. Cognitive behavioral therapy tells us that those positive thoughts will certainly impact our feelings and our behaviors and give us more opportunities to create wellness hills in our own lives. Thank you.